The Ashwater Inheritance. Dr. Alistair Finch felt the town of Ashwater swallow the sound of his car's engine. A perpetual, wet fog clung to the salt-rotted clapboard buildings, and the few faces he saw in the windows were as pale and blank as sea-bleached bone. He was here for the Gable collection, a library of maritime lore and forgotten texts rumored to be unparalleled. The locals in the next town over had warned him away. The Gables keep to themselves, they'd said, their eyes shifting away, and Ashwater, it keeps what's theirs. The Gable mansion was a Gothic monstrosity of widows' walks and gables sharp enough to pierce the sky, perched on a cliff overlooking the churning gray sea. The woman who answered the door was Alistair Gable. She was a slip of a thing, lost in a heavy woolen shawl, but her eyes held an ancient, unnerving intelligence. "Dr. Finch," she said, her voice a dry rustle. "My father expected you. The collection is this way. Do not wander. The house is old. The floorboards are not what they were." The library was a cathedral of dust and decay. Books with bindings of strange leather and titles in languages that slid off the eye were stacked to the ceiling. Finch felt a tremor of academic ecstasy mixed with primal fear. He found it on a high shelf, a copy of the Codex Rallia, its pages brittle and smelling of ozone and deep water. As his fingers brushed the cover, a slow, heavy thump, thump, thump echoed from the floor above. Ilara, standing in the doorway, smiled faintly. "The house settling," she said, but her eyes never left his. For days, Finch lost himself in the Gable texts. He pieced together the family's obsession from fragmented journals and annotated star charts. They weren't just collectors, they were gatekeepers. Or perhaps gate openers. One entry, scrawled in a shaking hand, spoke of 2 children, Ilara the voice, and another, unnamed, born not of flesh but of whisper. A living key meant to call something from the outer dark. That night, the thumping from upstairs was no longer rhythmic. It was a frantic, splintering sound, like a great beast testing the strength of its cage. A nor'easter slammed into Ashwater, cutting the town off from the world. The lights in the mansion flickered and died, plunging them into the oppressive dark of a single lantern's glow. Finch found Ilara by the grand staircase, her face pale and ecstatic. "I can't decipher this passage," he lied, holding up the codex. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You don't need to. It's a hymnal, Doctor. And the choir is waking up. The sibling is hungry. The tide is right. The gate will hear us tonight." A sound like the world splitting apart tore through the house. Finch looked up the staircase to see the plaster on the second-floor wall cracking, bulging outward. It wasn't the impact of a body. It was the pressure of a shape that did not belong. The geometry of the hallway seemed to warp around the strain, corners becoming curves, the ceiling seeming to lower. This was no deformed child. The house itself was the cage, and the bars were beginning to break. Ilara began to chant, the words a cascade of guttural clicks and sibilant hisses that hurt the air. As she spoke, the house screamed. A section of the ceiling tore open, and something that was not a tentacle, but a limb of frozen smoke and shifting eyes descended into the hall. It moved with a sickening fluidity, ignoring gravity. More pieces of the creature pushed through the walls. A mosaic of chitin, mouths that wept light, and flesh that was the color of a deep-sea bruise. It requires a vessel of knowledge to complete the calling. Ilara shrieked over the cacophony. A mind to anchor it. Finch didn't wait to understand. He ran. He fled through the labyrinthine corridors of the mansion, the air growing cold and thick around him. A clawed limb punched through a wall to his left, while a cluster of unblinking yellow eyes materialized in the floorboards before him, tracking his every move. The sibling was not just upstairs anymore. It was in the house, its presence seeping through the very fabric of reality. He burst out into the storm, the freezing rain, a baptism of reality. He scrambled away, turning back to look at the mansion. The top floor was gone, not collapsed but erased. In its place was a hole in the world, a shimmering distortion in the air where the rain fell sideways and the lightning bent. A colossal, unseen mass was ascending from the ruin, its sheer presence buckling the storm around it. On the precipice of the cliff, Alara Gable stood, her arms raised to the sky, a silhouetted priestess welcoming her god. Finch never stopped driving. He left Ashwater to its fog and its secrets. Years later, now a man with haunted eyes and shaking hands, he still pores over ancient texts, not with academic curiosity, but with the desperation of a soldier studying his enemy. He knows what the world doesn't. A door was opened that night. Something was called, and it answered. He knows the Gable sibling is not dead. A thing not truly born cannot truly die. It is merely unseen, a vast and patient hunger drifting between the stars, and sometimes, on clear nights, he feels its gaze upon the world. A gaze that is searching, a gaze that remembers him. The storm that lashed at his car was no natural thing. It was a tempest with a malevolent will. The radio, which had been silent, crackled to life, spewing static that coalesced into the same guttural whispers of Alara's chant. He risked a glance in the rearview mirror and saw the rain-slicked road behind him twist into an impossible, swirling vortex. He was not just fleeing a place, he was being pursued by its ghost. He reached the next town over, a beacon of mundane light that felt more alien than the horrors of the mansion. At a dingy motel, he tried to scrub the night away in a scalding shower, but the chill was in his bones. Staring at his reflection, he saw it. On the back of his hand, a faint, intricate symbol glowed with a soft, cold light. It was a brand, a star map etched into his skin. He had been marked. The local news on the motel television spoke of a freak seismic event off the coast. The town of Ashwater, including the old Gable estate, had been lost to a massive sinkhole. The footage was grainy, but Finch could see it clearly. The edges of the crater shimmered, the light bending around it. It was not a hole in the earth. It was a wound in the fabric of the world. Years passed. Finch became a ghost, moving from city to city, his life's work transformed. The books he now sought were not for publication, but for salvation. He unearthed the history of the Gables, a long line of wardens, not worshippers. Alara was the last of them, a failure who had embraced her prisoner instead of containing it. The sibling was not their god, it was their shame. The brand on his hand would burn, a phantom fire that brought visions. He saw cities built from angles that made the eyes bleed, and felt the brush of intelligences vast and cold. He was an unwilling window. The sibling, anchored to him, was looking through his eyes, learning this reality, tasting this world, and searching for other weak points, other doors. In a dusty tome acquired from a dead man's library, he found it, a letter from a lost branch of the family. They wrote of a schism, a rejection of the Gables' duty. They spoke not of a calling, but of a closing. The ritual required a silent bell and had to be performed at another nexus point, an abandoned observatory in the Atacama Desert. For the first time in years, Finch felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was hope, and it was terrible. The Atacama was a place of profound silence, the sky a dome of crushing, crystalline stars. The abandoned observatory was a white bone on the arid landscape. As he approached, the air grew heavy, the silence deepening. The mark on his hand pulsed with a cold, eager fire. The sibling knew where he was. It was waiting. He found the silent bell inside the dome. It was a complex orrery of interlocking, non-reflective rings and lenses, aimed at a patch of sky where there was nothing, a void between constellations. Following the letter's cryptic instructions, he began to align the ancient machinery, the clicks of the gears echoing like heartbeats in the stillness. As the final ring clicked into place, the desert vanished. Through the open dome, there was only the outer dark, a maelstrom of impossible color and living geometry. The sibling was there, a fractured consciousness made of a million eyes and a chorus of silent screams. It flooded his mind with its sheer, alien immensity, showing him the utter futility of his struggle, the cosmic insignificance of his world. It requires a vessel of knowledge. Ilara's triumphant shriek echoed in his memory. An anchor. A connection. Finch looked at the brand on his hand, then at the central lens of the device. He understood. He pressed his hand to the cold, dark metal, not offering his mind as a key, but offering the connection itself as a sacrifice. The device did not ring. It unleashed a wave of pure nullity, a silence so profound it had physical force. The chaos outside recoiled. The sibling's psychic roar was a silent thunder that cracked the inside of his skull. The brand on his hand flared into white-hot agony and then vanished. The vision shattered, and the cold, starry night of the desert rushed back in. He was alone. The device was inert. The mark was gone. He had not won, he knew. He had not killed the beast. He had only slammed one of 1,000 doors in its face, and, in doing so, had drawn its full and undivided attention. The sibling was still out there, patient and vast. And now it knew it was not welcome. The silence he had bought was temporary. The war had just begun.